Hey, everybody.
Oh.
What's going on?
What's up, people?
Yo.
Yo.
It's been a while.
Good to see you all again. It's been a long time.
I wouldn't go as far as saying it's good to see you all again, but...
I'm going to block you on Twitter for that, Nick.
Just force it.
I like to start off by advertising my great country, which has legalized marijuana today. I will never smoke this stuff, but you guys all live in the U.S., so you're a bunch of criminals.
You know, man, I've talked about this before, but I can't wait for this to happen in the U.S. There's so many things about it that are helpful, and there are so many things that are not. That if there was only more education about it, people would realize it. I've had many a friend smoke the wrong thing and lose their mind, not permanently, luckily, but yeah. I'm looking forward to the day where you could just go in and order exactly what you'd like. The same way that I go into a bar and I'm like, man, I've had a bad day. Give me 3 shots of Jägermeister and a Guinness. Or at the same time, I'm like, I would like a glass of red wine with my steak, please.
Bob, I'm sure if people knew, if our politicians knew, they would have banned alcohol for you already. So.
That's right.
I'm looking forward to the day when the penalties get harsher and we can put these drug addicts in the prisons and then to the gallows where they belong.
Nick, with a mustache like yours, I would never mention the word prison because it couldn't end well for you in any way.
So yeah, what's the latest? Who feels like talking about something cool first?
Well, I've noticed that they've kind of gotten rid of good deals on the 12-pack full cans, so I've been buying tiny cans.
Makes your hand feel big.
They're still doing buy 2 get 3 free by me all the time.
Like, I think the last one was like buy 3 get 5 free. I'm like, I'm not gonna carry all these to the car. Yeah. This is ridiculous.
Kind of ridiculous, yeah. My store also got rid of Dr. Pepper 10s, which is kind of heartbreaking. So, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm drinking LaCroix tonight. I know I mentioned this on Twitter that I think it's one of the most interesting companies right now because nobody cared about this stupid water like 20, 30 years ago when this came out. And now it's like super, like every tech company you go into, just everyone's drinking this
because it's super trendy. It's super trendy to run bazillion marathons and super trendy to hate soda now.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't get it. I don't know how this came about.
I've been drinking that stuff for a long time. I think it's companies like that make a good product but don't put enough money into marketing. I think that's I just think that's what happens. I think they fly under the radar for years and people that know about it like it, and then next thing you know, they get a marketing budget or some famous person's caught drinking one. A Kardashian has a sex tape on top of the box, whatever. Then next thing you know, everybody's buying it because they realize it was always good.
Yeah.
That's right, Bob.
I mean, actually, most of the flavors are pretty terrible. Like, the lemon one tastes like Pine Sol smells. But the grapefruit one's good. So.
The schnozberries taste like schnozberries.
Schnozberries.
I'll take sugar in my grapefruit drink.
Yeah, I'll just take beer. Beer and water is fine for me. Although occasionally I do get any of the fizzies that don't have aspartame in it, because I like to pretend that aspartame is the reason I got fat and not all the pizza and beer.
So since this is a food show, are we going to talk about recipes next?
Yeah.
Or what's...
I was going to talk about beverages the whole time.
Yeah.
I have an interesting point to make, though, before we move on. Is Nick's talking about, I think it's the lemon flavor. He said it was disgusting.
Yeah.
Does it say natural flavoring on the can?
Yeah. Though, that doesn't know that the necessarily
it's 1% natural.
No, because in many cases when they claim that it's naturally flavored, what it actually is a culture of bacteria that has the same kind of flavor as what they're trying to imitate.
And I didn't know that.
Yeah.
It wouldn't surprise me.
So it's harmless, benign bacteria, but that just, they've tested and bred so many different kinds of bacteria that some of them just happen to, have an aroma like raspberries, and some of them happen to have an aroma like lemon, but it's not completely identical, right? But still, it's a bacterial culture that has a flavor of what it's trying to be like.
Sounds delicious.
That's interesting.
Have you ever read the statistics on stuff like that? So on random bacteria cultures and things like that, it's something like 1 in 4 million or something like that has adverse reactions. But that means if more than 4 million people drink it, one person might be growing a third eye or a seventh testicle or something just because they drank too much of it. That's some scary shit.
Yeah, or 1 in 4 million could just become abnormally fat from drinking aspartame. So.
Yeah, there you go. That's totally what I'm going to blame completely. As I sip my, 12% alcohol, sludge porter beer. Totally not this.
That's really good. I'm so glad that we're having a polarizing and engaging conversation about things that nobody gives two shits about. Thank you, everybody, for coming.
That's the show, though. That's normally the show.
That's the whole show.
In the midst of them talking about this, I went to the archives here, and I've been cleaning my underground man chambers, and it just kind of shows you my secret underground man chambers.
You're shaving your butthole.
I hope you do that like on a daily basis, man. Get some soap and keep it smelling
it's once a year, and to kind of show you guys how I've just not been doing any normal things. Like, these are all brand new retro gamers. I've been subscribing to this magazine for 20 years, and I have a shelf now. I mean, this is how many I'm back. Like, I'm backlogged on. I've not got to enjoy life. So I think I'm going to be quitting everything, including including this podcast, because I want to open these goddamn things every once in a while. So keep talking about aspartame
put the
and
stack of them in the bathroom and just.
I was about to say that.
That's the thing. I don't even have time to shit anymore. I just don't. I've learned not to do that.
It's like in that South Park episode where they're playing World of Warcraft and Cartman has his mom come down so he can shit in the bucket so he doesn't have to stop playing.
Exactly.
That's Zach.
Exactly it.
He has his blow up doll behind him, taking care of it.
Yeah. So, I don't know for everybody else. Not that I'm trying to monopolize this wonderful conversation, but I think everyone here has been really busy.
Swamped.
This past 2 months, everyone has been absolutely busy, and I think we're all just getting a little annoyed and tired of life. And I say that we all go on vacation again.
Right now?
Until the Christmas episode.
Yeah, right now, everyone, let's get the hell out of here. No, I'm just kidding. But no, we've all been really busy.
So busy that I'm designing a PCB as we speak. I mean.
Yeah, so Renee's doing that, and I'm doing all sorts of fun things, very productive things. And that's all I have to say about the things that I'm working on right now, because there's a lot of cool stuff happening. That's all I want to talk about. Can we move on to group topics, please? I'm just kidding. I'm just fucking around people.
Yeah, we've all been hitting hard. I was shirtless shooting modding footage right up until 2 seconds before this thing started. So
yeah, you'll never get that out of your mind, audience. Every video that you watch of Bob's now, you're gonna be picturing him behind the camera shirtless.
That's right.
The funny thing is, me and my underwear looks almost exactly like this. Just instead of jeans, it's just I got shorts on that are the normal size, like basketball shorts, but boxers. And yes, for the record, I am right now doing that amazingly sexy thing. Don't get chubbies, boys. I have socks and flip-flops on.
I was going to say, I noticed that when you stuck your leg out, and I'm afraid we can no longer be friends. I mean,
you really are a sick bitch. You know that?
I do have reasons for doing that, though, because I screwed my back up when I stood barefoot on a hardwood floor, 13 hours a day for 3 weeks straight. I was like, oh, probably should have thought of that. So I have these really awesome flip-floppy things that now I could stand all day long and not, hurt my feet. And it's cold in here, so I need socks. So there you go. Welcome to... next thing you know, all I need is one of those automated scooters at fucking Walmart, and I will be middle America.
You're not the first person, Bob, who has hurt their back going bareback. Is that what you said?
Close enough.
Okay. So it's okay. Don't feel too bad about it.
All right, before I go, I'm going to have to give a shout out to Dave Kirscher and Chris Syme, who donated to the podcast. Thank you for filling the coffers. I finally got my AdSense account set up, but we haven't made enough money to extract any of it. But I think we're close to the point where after today, I probably will be able to take out the money and buy the podcast space and put all the audio episodes up. So I think that'll be coming soon. So that'll
Will that be
sweet.
coming before or after your Dreamcast cable?
Yeah. Way before.
Way before.
Way before.
Oh,
I don't know if you noticed, Bob, but there's zero evidence that Dreamcast stuff is even being worked on.
I know. I thought you threw out all of your equipment and canceled the project.
listen,
It's misplaced.
Steve and I
Right?
were talking about the progress of the Dreamcast cables like a year ago as we were eating ribs off of my back deck, and
Yeah.
here we are.
If you need to borrow one, Steve, if you can't find your Dreamcast, I could lend you mine as soon as I'm done shooting this video on it, because I don't know if you're out of Dreamcasts or anything.
I'll have to hit you up on that.
Yeah, as soon
There
as
you
he
go.
gets done with the Pound video cable review, you can borrow his Dreamcast. Steve. God, Jesus, that was bad.
Uh,
Oh God, I'm hurting myself.
So yeah, I suppose let's get on with it since we have a lot of topics to hit tonight.
Yeah, let's hurry up and get this over with.
Yeah, let's hurry up and get this over with. Something I did like 2 hours ago at the last minute. Because, well, I just got it in the mail from Steve this weekend. We got our hands. This is the first time I had my hands on a
Woman.
Ultra HDMI mod. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I'm glad we're not on Discord like we originally planned because nobody would be able to hear any of this.
Yeah.
I'm
But,
quiet. I'm quiet.
Yeah, so I was messing around with the Ultra HDMI because we were curious after, I don't remember who mentioned it, but after we were talking about how we really didn't like the hybrid scan line implementation that we messed around with in the Super NT, somebody suggested that possibly it wasn't done correctly in the Super NT, but it was done correctly in the N64 on the Ultra HDMI. So I didn't see any difference testing that out. I think, again, I'm just not a fan of the look at all. It just does this thing where in brighter colors, it washes out almost entirely the scan line. And there's absolutely no controls on the Ultra HDMI for how strong you want that effect. It's either on or full scan lines. And I think the full scan lines look way better for that. And just Ultra HDMI in general, I think it's super cool. The various features for VID blur and all that are cool. Definitely if you use the sharp pixels and VID blur at the same time, it looks atrocious. I think you have to pick
it looks
one.
awesome sometimes.
Oh, it looks
Depends on the
way...
game.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't think so, Bob. I think it's a It's when you do that, it's a betrayal of that technology and what it was supposed to look like. It's a personal opinion of mine, but I agree with Nick. It looks like ass.
I only put in a couple of games, so I mean, this is not super extensive, but my overwhelming opinion was that, like, keep VI blur on and the other one off.
Yep.
So, yeah.
I think we're in the minority.
Yeah, I don't know.
You hit it, crank your volume up.
Yeah.
My volume's low, like on the stream, or
I
Yeah.
think on the stream. I hear you fine on Skype.
okay, I can crank up a little bit. So yeah, cool stuff. Neat product. My biggest complaint, I guess, about it is the flimsiness of that mini HDMI connector thing on it, or micro HDMI, whatever it is. Not a big fan of that.
If
But-
it's installed correctly, it's not a big deal. You put
Yeah.
the pressure on the plastic and not the thing itself.
What are you talking about?
Yeah, I don't think it was installed correctly.
Yeah, it definitely moves and bends a little bit. and
No,
then you
that
can-
was the whole board was moving.
Oh yeah, the whole board.
Oh, yeah. I'm going to go with not installed correctly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Did
now,
you try to do it yourself, Nick?
I just told you Steve shipped me the thing.
I know. Just.
Yeah, one of our friends, he let me borrow his thing, and I fixed his install because he ripped pads off the board, and I had to use 36 gauge wire and reconstitute.
Reroute things.
Yeah, but then I didn't install the he cut the plastic after I fixed the electrical, and then I'm like, hey, remember when I fixed your thing because you totally broke the N64? Well, let me borrow it for like 3 months.
Yeah. Well, I can get it back to him fairly soon. But Yeah, it's cool. I still would much rather prefer that console on a CRT, but
Oh, totally.
if you're gonna use the Ultra HDMI, I recommend like a 40% strength normal scan line and skip that hybrid scan line stuff. Not a big fan. So that's all about it for me.
You know, I might be in the minority for this, but I think that I really enjoy the way scan lines look on a CRT and obviously a like a Sony BVM. I like those thick, sharp scan lines on a BVM, but I don't usually like fake scan lines at all on flat screens. At first, they were kind of cool just because it's like, oh, look, it kind of reminds me sort of, but I think until we have enough resolution where we could draw horizontal and vertical, it just looks like black lines across the screen to me. But
If I'm sitting far away enough from my TV, I think scan lines like on the OSSC and 5X look not too bad. But I have to be sitting like a good, like I'd say I'm almost 10 feet away. Like if I go any closer, it just annoys the hell out of me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it only looks good if you put it in 720 mode on the Ultra HDMI. If you put it on 1080p mode, it's a mess. The scan line thing, I guess. Math, but yeah.
Cool.
All right, Steve, how about you? Why don't you talk about what you wanted to?
Yeah, I got two small things to mention that I discovered when I was goofing around with stuff. First is I was trying to characterize like various audio output levels, so I know what kind of ranges I need to support on some projects coming up. And I noticed on the Genesis 1, the mono audio, like clips on the top. And I never really noticed that. I remember when we first were talking about like back in the Kickstarter days when we were making the Genesis cables and we were trying to sneak in the stereo audio jack, and there was some guy who said that he'd rather use the mono because the stereo jack, the amplifier, has very low signal to noise ratio, like it's very noisy, like, and it is a little bit noisy, but then he's like he'd rather use the mono, but like what I just saw with the mono, like you get really bad nonlinear distortion from the clipping. Like it clips hard on the top end, and it's all due to they run the audio through the video encoder chip and it buffers it out, but they don't attenuate it at all so it can fit through that buffer stage. So the tops get like chopped off, and so you get really distorted audio. I don't know if people realize that, or maybe some people are used to that and they think that's the right way it's supposed to sound. I don't know. I just thought it was an interesting observation because I found it accidentally.
Well, fortunately, nobody cares about audio, or at least mono audio, on the Genesis. So this is,
Well, that's why I mentioned that guy, because he did, right?
Right. The one guy in the world.
So you just brought up two things, right? So first of all, when you're talking about classic consoles, or really anything that's not considered new, it's very hard to argue with people when they think the way they experienced it is the way it should be experienced. In fact, that's a human condition right there. Anybody that's learned something in their youth that for the rest of their lives that will battle you to the death, that's the truth. But so that you have to learn
like
to
only 90s music is good and everything else that came after is terrible.
Right, like why PPR is garbage and SCART is the best connector on the planet. But I actually hate this connector, but whatever. Point being, RGB for life. But yeah, that's the first part of it that you you got to just ignore, because you start to get into the you should play games with the RF adapter because that's how the Saturn was supposed to be played or something. You got to walk away. But
I don't like telling people how to do anything. So
that's right.
I just walk right away from those conversations. But as long as it's not clipping and as long as it's not distortion, but as far as mono audio goes, all objective opinion or subjective opinions aside, is there any advantage of it other than you only have one speaker? Like if you have a TV that has one speaker, is there anything, any reason for it?
The only thing I could think of is, I don't even know if it is an issue, but maybe that's dependent upon games that were mixed for stereo, or maybe games that were games that are mixed for stereo but not mixed for mono, or games that are mixed for mono and aren't necessarily mixed for stereo. Maybe there's some utility there when you only have it jamming out of, it's only tuned for one speaker, and your game music or your game sound effects aren't tuned to go out of two speakers. Maybe.
So 100% spot on possible. And in fact, if anybody's an old music fan, I don't love the Beatles, but apparently some of their other albums you really should listen to in mono, because they weren't even in the room for the stereo mix. It was a gimmick. It was almost like today's surround sound mixes of metal soundtracks. It's like useless.
Sounds
exactly
like the fake NES stereo, which I think is garbage.
Yeah, you just split the voices between two different speakers. There's no
perspective,
rhyme or reason to that, right?
Yeah.
Right. Well, just stay on topic because I have an opinion on that. But if there are games that anybody knows of, if Ace is in the chat, he might know. But if there are any games that were specifically designed for mono, maybe that would be a good reason to use it. But I like a little bit of separation on the next channel.
This proves that if you are going to use mono, like that's desirable, it's better to mix it yourself out of the headphone jack so you don't get the clipped version coming out.
There you go. Okay.
Or just attenuate the audio before it hits the gain buffer on the 1145.
Well, yeah, if you want to do an internal mod, yeah, you could do that.
I always go internal, Steve.
Ace said Afterburner 2 is mono. That's freaking mind-blowing, because in the arcade, the one where you'd sit in and it would move and everything, I could swear that was stereo.
Well, that's the arcade, though, right?
Yeah, maybe they just monoed it, made it mono for the Genesis version. Huh.
But yeah, that's the only thing I can think of, Bob, is, that's the answer is dependent upon if the game, whether or not it's tailored for mono or stereo. Maybe that would be a reason.
Did you test a Genesis 3 at all?
Yes, it was only the Genesis ones, because they run the Genesis 2 and the Genesis 3 mono audio was fine because they use their own op amp to drive it out. And that op amp has a 0 to 5 range, and they bias it in the middle. So it's they have the full range. It's the CXA has a 2-volt range or something like that.
Well, all I know is
system. I'm sorry, Bob. I wonder if the Master System that also, there are Master Systems that have the 1145, and then there are Master Systems that don't have a CXA 1145 encoder, and they drive the PSG audio externally from that. I wonder if Master System audios, if anyone's ever done sort of a taste test to see how different the Master Systems that use the 1145 as a buffer for audio sound in comparison to the Master Systems that use that externalize or break out the audio for that.
So like a couple of weeks ago when I was doing this and I was asking you guys in the chat, like I was talking with Renee if he knew of a game that did loud audio, and because I tested like all 7 or 8 of my Master Systems, but none of them got loud enough to the point where it would clip. So it's probably fine. I couldn't get the Master System audio to clip, but I don't have something that exercises the full range.
I think I had recommended one of the there's a game, I think there's one of the Wonder Boy games that uses the 3 PSG channels in sync to do sample playback. So that probably reaches the maximum volume at some point.
Yeah, it's the Genesis with the V series encoder. I think it just has it's an NPN transistor that drives the audio, and that's all it really is. So okay, I was just wondering. It's just an interesting question.
Yeah.
For my body. Okay.
All I know is I've been doing a shitload of testing of the triple bypass. We've roped in a lot of people in the New York scene to help. Those consoles are going through a lot of hands, and everybody is going absolutely apeshit. There's a few people with discerning ears that are are trying to figure out why things sound specific ways. But then again, a lot of them are very conscious of the fact that, hey, I've had this one Genesis my whole life. Maybe I'm just used to that. Let me try a few others. Let me come back. Any of the tweaks that we've done, really, we ended up just putting it back to the way that, not really messing with it. So that's promising. We have a couple more model revisions that we're going to be doing in the next 3 or 4 weeks. But that's looking pretty goddamn kick-ass, and I'm excited for it.
I hope
Triple
you're using
bypass?
Mhm.
What's that? What's that?
Well, I hope you're using the correct resistor, Bob, for God's sakes.
We tried both. The boards are no. I mean, that's, I love to joke about shit like that, but I was complaining to you guys about a sound that may or may not have been 0.2 dB off, like nothing a normal human would hear. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to trying to figure out if there is a big difference and what's the best. But all I know is that Genesis 3 that I had, I lifted the subcarrier on it, looked great, it sounded great in mono, to be honest with you. It wasn't as horrible as some of the other ones I've had. And then we put the triple bypass in. Holy shit. And one of the things that I'm noticing is that the colors look so much better with both the exact same differences. So stock versus Voltar / triple bypass with the 7374. And I'm assuming that's because you guys attenuated the signal properly so that the RGB levels are exactly where they're supposed to be, not where, whatever Sega's 20% tolerance resistors left them. And I'm even seeing that on the MiSTer FPGA core, where they built it to look just like the Genesis and not the way a video enthusiast would want it, the correct way. So it's pretty neat. But I love the way it looks. I think it's perfect. Both of them, both of the 7374 based solutions.
Cool.
Yeah, we did our homework.
Yeah, we did. We know. We played the fucking game, Bob. Renee and I did.
So
we know
it's shocking that you guys are able to do that, considering that quality can't be measured.
We know what the hell we're doing.
What are you working on now, Renee? What do you literally right this minute? You said you were
It's classified.
Literally right this minute, I'm working on something that's under NDA, so I cannot reveal it. But what I've been really busy with these last few weeks, this last month, is I've done a lot of research on making a version 2 of the Universal Mega Dumper. As you recall, I was supposed to release the design files and the PCBs for that and bring it out to the public, but with my group on Discord, we realized it was missing a lot of features that we required, and the Teensy processor that's on there is like a small AVR 8-bit, and it wasn't performing as we'd hoped. And moreover, the AVR that's used on there is going EOL in 2019. So I decided, all right, now's the time to move to a different CPU.
What AVR is it?
It's a 1890 USB something, I think.
Okay.
I can find that out exactly when I'm done talking.
Yeah. It's fine.
I mean, so PGRC is saying that he's gonna have Teensies till at least 2021. But the other thing I really didn't like about that Teensy is, and I never liked it, is that the bootloader is proprietary. So you always have to get that ROM burnt by PGRC. So
I never knew that. Is that legal in the open source community?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Everything that he does is open source, but he says you have to run it on my platform. And he doesn't.
But the bootloader is just a blob?
Yeah. The bootloader.
But that's not open source.
No.
So how does that work?
Yeah, that wouldn't get. I guess it wouldn't certify for Ashwa.
No,
at all.
And usually, the main thing that you're concerned with in open source is that users are able to, modify the program code on there. And while you're not able to modify the bootloader, you can freely upload your own program all the time, right? So it doesn't prevent any sort of user modification. So.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
So I did a lot of research on PIC32, and I selected a PIC32 processor that I'm going to use for UMDv2. And the PCB is like maybe 50% done thus far. Yeah, I'm going like this, but it's not actually what's on my screen. There's an open source project for PIC32 that's called ChipKit that makes it compatible with a bunch of Arduino libraries, which is great because it makes all the code that we've written thus far for UMD 100% portable and compatible to the new platform. So I just have to change the small hardware abstraction layer at the very end, and everything will still be supported on the new platform.
Cool.
Is PIC32 an ARM or is it their own architecture?
It's a MIPS.
Oh, okay.
So I modified bootloaders to work on my versions of the hardware because all the ChipKit boards place the bootloader button on a one pin that is extremely useful for other things, which I thought was really stupid. Luckily, the code was really, really well written, so modifying the bootloader was stupid simple. Except Microchip provides you with a free compiler that doesn't optimize enough to fit the bootloader in the boot flash. So, but when you first install MPLab, you get a trial version of the full compiler. So if you install MPLab and you can figure out how to change the bootloader within 30 days and build it and get your binaries out of there, then you're good.
That's crazy.
So what I did was, once I figured out how to change those pins in the bootloaders, I built a whole bunch of binaries with that button on a bunch of different pins just in case I'll need to change it. So then I got binaries that say, okay, program button on pin C1, program button on pin C2 and C3 and so on. And I've got a bunch of different variants that I'll be able to use. So that's the thing for the major aspects for UMD V2. Some of the features that V2 is going to have is there'll be an SD card on board, so you can provide the ROMs on SD and not have to dump them through the USB interface all the time. It'll be able to select either a 3.3 volt bus or a 5 volt bus. They've already had some luck with sourcing Game Boy connectors, so hopefully that'll translate to making an interface for Game Boy Advance games.
Cool.
That's cool.
And another 3.3 volt system, so N64. So dependent on if we can get connectors for that, then we'd also be able to make an interface for N64. And a nice to have feature that I'd want on there would be that it should be able to support JTAG programming as well. Like for instance, I'm making Master System carts, right? But you need to program the CPLD. It's kind of a pain in the ass to burn the ROM and then burn the CPLD with another programmer. So it'd be great if I could recycle a SPI port and a few pins and just have like a dongle that'll do the CPLD bitstream at the same time, right?
Yeah, it'd be neat.
Yeah, shouldn't be too hard. I mean,
That'd be pretty cool.
How many people do you have working on this project with you at this point? I don't know how many contributors you've got.
I sent like 10 or so boards out to a bunch of different people. Not everybody actually contributed. So if I look on my GitHub, there's 5 people that have actually contributed code.
Lord Artemio for sure.
Our Lord Artemio has contributed code.
He has blessed the project.
He has blessed it. He fixed a few issues with supporting mappers on PC Engine and Genesis. We've been... Oh, he's... They're talking right now. That's hilarious. We've been quiet lately because I'm going through the redesign, so I'm trying not to touch the feature set too much right now, but I expect maybe a month or two I'll have a new PCB, and UMDv2 will be out. And
Cool.
fully open source because we're not dependent on the PGRC bootloader.
That's really good, Renee. I'm really glad that you're being fully transparent with that. It keeps your credibility and your integrity in good standing, in my opinion, unlike Bob. So, all right, good move.
Nice. I guess did everybody go? I always leave Bob out. I don't think we left him out this time.
I interrupted so many people. I feel like I already had my turn, so let's just leave it at that.
I had a couple more donations come in. One from John and one from Bubba D. Matt, who asked, "Would the MiSTer be good for a home arcade cab?"
So absolutely, as long as the games that you want to play are games that MiSTer already has cores for. By the way, I hate the name MiSTer. I feel like I'm
so
about
lame.
to I feel like Nick has his mustache and just tried to steal my wallet. And I'm like, hey, MiSTer.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's no.
I thought it was called Mr. FPGA, like Mr. Coffee.
I like the name now because you said that. Spaceballs is like the best comedy ever. So
I do love it. But yeah, so as long as the games that you're looking to play are on there. So, for example, there's a couple of games that they're working on arcade cores that are near perfect, if not already, because the originals are never perfect either. But at that point, if it's it might actually even be cheaper to get this, and then it would be to get original arcade boards, a super gun, the accessories, and that's certainly what they're aiming for with the super graphics. So to get a super graphics now, it's like $400 or something, and then you got to cut the plastic tab. You might have to do a cap replacement. You got to buy a ROM card, or you got to buy a super CD SD3 and then do 2 bypasses to that. Or you could buy the MiSTer kit for around $200 total, including the FPGA, and then it's getting there. It's getting pretty damn close to original. So I think I think it's definitely something that if you pick it up now, even if it doesn't do what you want it to do now, it might someday. Just have realistic expectations. You're not going to be playing PlayStation 3 CDs on it or anything. But
Well, the remarkable thing about the MiSTer or any FPGA technology, and you're talking about these much older arcade games. Most of the old arcade games that people are talking about ran off 68Ks, ran off of Z80s, maybe a 6508. Which is basically a 6502, only it has 2 accumulators and a few more index registers. The point is, though, is that, unlike video game systems like the Super Nintendo or the Nintendo, where you have a lot of proprietary hardware, like the PPU, for example, you can't look at all the gates, so you don't exactly know how it works. You have to take certain liberties and make interpretations of what you think the hardware is doing. With these arcade boards, it's fantastic because it's all TTL logic on these boards. For the most part. So, your tile generator, your scrolling registers, everything is on a board, and you don't even necessarily have to understand it. You just have to know how it's all connected. And if you have a multimeter, if you have a multimeter and a little logic probe, you can map all of this stuff out and translate that into software or into your FPGA for your FPGA core, and you can truly make a one-to-one replica and have a complete one-to-one replica of a lot of this arcade hardware because you have real access to the hardware. I think that's really cool. I think that's super cool. Sorry.
Yeah. I was really excited by this MiSTer FPGA stuff. I'm always going to say MiSTer FPGA now because it's so excellent.
It's awesome.
I ordered a DE10 Nano kit yesterday just to be able to play with that. I've discussed a bit on some of the things I'd like to do with that. I'm not going to discuss any of them here publicly because I don't want people to have expectations out of me because these features might take like a year or 2 to develop. But if enough people like us, if enough skilled engineers pick up these DE10 Nanos and work on MiSTer FPGA, MiSTer FPGA could become a really awesome alternative to commercial products.
So, let's just say you're an end user, not somebody that wants to work on the code side of it and just have a MiSTer FPGA to play your games. How much of a setup is this thing? Because I've only kind of tangentially seen people talk about things here and there about how there's kind of various like daughter boards you have to wire up for controller ports and things like that. Is this like a big undertaking or?
So I just did this a few days ago, and I did it while I was in the middle of working on something else. I just really wanted to test something, so it was the perfect scenario because when I went through and I looked, basically you get a software package that has the cores and everything already configured. I'm not sure if that is public or if it's going to become public, but it will be soon. And then, so all you do is flash you use a utility to flash a micro SD card. You throw some ROMs on it, you put it in, and you turn it on, and that's it. The only thing that nobody told me, or maybe they told me and I just wasn't listening, was that you absolutely need a USB hub because it's the micro USB on it. So you should definitely get one of those. I bought one for $6 that worked perfect, so not a big deal. And you need to plug in a keyboard at least the first time so that you could program buttons on whatever controller you're using. So, but the USB hub thing is something that might be fixed because I only have the DE10 Nano. I didn't get the MiSTer part where you just plug that on top. I think the USB port might be solved with that. And any of the things like you need a keyboard now will eventually be solved with GUI updates and firmware. And that is the only thing that a useless person like me can add, because while I can't program software or Verilog, I could certainly provide feedback for, in the middle of the ground, from a beginner perspective and somebody that understands the back end. So I guarantee that I'll bug everybody enough until the full interface is easy so that anybody could plug it in, but it's pretty damn easy right now. It's as easy, I guess, as programming a Raspberry Pi for an emulation box, if not easier.
Cool.
How do controllers work, Bob? Do controllers for that thing, do you have to deal with USB overhead because you're using, I guess, a USB gamepad, or have they made modules that will take advantage of the GPIO on there so you can drive controllers directly through the I/O interfaces? That would be ideal, right?
Yeah, both. So right now, as I'm playing it, is through a USB hub using the USB protocol, which is variable lag, which is it's really the problem. Because all the times I rant about lag, if you have specifically, 22 milliseconds of lag consistently, any human could get used to that. It's, the variable polling of the USB ports. But the MiSTer add-on, especially the one I think Ash Evans just added a bunch of cool shit to it. You could have a serial input so that it is I'm going to say almost zero lag, but the almost thing is one time out of 1,000 it might hit it at a different scan rate than a stock console would be. It's something that even I would call not measurable in a way that would matter. So yeah, you just if you use a USB controller into it, you do get the USB issues. But if you use the MiSTer part of it with the new controller polling, then yeah, it's pretty much zero. And you could even use the undammed adapter. Not the undammed. I'm sorry, the MC Cthulhu. So technically, that's you could have a USB output of that, but that won't be USB. It'll be direct one-to-one. So it's pretty cool shit.
This thing is. It seems like the MiSTer out of nowhere. It may have been around for a while, but it seems like out of nowhere, within the course of a couple of hours, everybody's talking about it, and it's really kind of blown up. And I think what it is for the first time, this technology is available to the people in this community, and it's truly open source. And there is a common goal now to where if the community could really work together and put polish on this, like Renee said, this is a viable option that could be competitive or comparable to what's currently commercially available. Not saying it's that right now, but I think that's what's so fascinating, and that's why I'm really interested in it, and I'd like to contribute. I would love to contribute to it. I think this is going to be really cool to see what happens with the MiSTer in the next 6 months, even in the next 3 months, 3 to 6 months. I'd really like to see sort of like the roadmap for this thing and what happens with it, and just how polished and mature it can become with the energy behind it.
Yeah, I think the biggest advantage that it has, well, the two biggest, is that it's FPGA, so it has the potential to read original card speed, zero lag. But I think the other, in the long run, the bigger advantage that it has is that people have nailed down one set of base hardware to buy, the D10 Nano, and then they're all working on the same hardware together. And I think because of that, it's going to blow up as fast as the Raspberry Pi stuff did. Because, I mean, we're all nerds. We've all built emulation boxes since, remember Nesticle? Like, we've all, hopefully we're all old enough to remember that software. Like,
Never
we've all
heard of
been
it.
messing with that stuff.
Mhm.
And, the biggest problem that I had was, as good as I was able to get some of those, I couldn't replicate it. You'd have to go order the exact same motherboard, CPU, everything else. And now that there's one set of hardware to work on, I think that's what's really going to make a huge difference.
Yeah.
People in the chat seem to be agreeing that it's thanks to Smoke Monster that this is kind of exploded. Because I guess he's been doing some streams demoing it.
Yeah, and I don't know if a lot of people know this, but Smoke Monster was famous for his ROM packs, but he does more behind-the-scenes work for the whole arcade world than he does for all the ROM stuff. So this is kind of like the perfect thing for him. This is, he's absolutely the perfect point person because he understands the arcade world, all the ROM sets that you need, and everything else. So. Yeah, I'll make sure to follow all of his videos.
People are asking me if I program, and I'm just showing them.
Well, you're showing them books. You're not showing them.
You're showing them that you intend to learn how to program.
I know. I intend to learn how to do it.
Once I learn how to read, I'll be able to get through these.
I can show you smart people stuff too. I have it right here. I bought it, and I've made sure to put it right next to the oscilloscope where I have not opened it.
Just get it on audiobook, Bob.
Yeah, Bob. I'll get the Dan Brown version.
There you go. Back on the shelf.
That version you have is really awesome because the disc that comes with has the PDF, so you could search for terms.
Even better.
Yeah.
So speaking of FPGA consoles, one was announced recently that I think everybody in the chat's been wanting us to talk about, which is the Collectorvision Phoenix FPGA Kickstarter console.
Oh man, I jumped on that right away. I pre-ordered the Maximum.
I'm sure you did, Renee. I'm sure you did. Look,
Oh,
there's
God.
always a good hint, and I'm going to say something a little controversial. You guys probably won't disagree or won't agree with me, but whenever I get like a press release sent to me, in like normal press jacket form, it usually seems like a company that's got its shit together. Whenever I get 7 or 8 tweets within a minute or two to get of each other about something, all from different people that are equally totally enthusiastic, but definitely don't have anything to do with the project, it usually ends up something like the Coleco Chameleon.
Was one of those people John Lester?
Paprium, same thing. I got blown up for that game, and then now the same thing happened. So I don't know who that is, but as soon as I got the first tweet on it, I was like, oh, I should look into this. And then boop, 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 boop. I'm like, oh, no, it looks like somebody who's pulling a scam trying to get me to talk about it. So that's not what it is, I guess. I've talked to people. They said it's a legit company, supposedly, but it smelled of Paprium.
It's not. It's absolutely not a scam. And
yeah, I don't think it's a scam either.
I don't have anything. What I'm about to say, it's nothing personal. I have nothing against the guy. But there's a consistent theme here where the way that these things by this one particular person have been appropriated and used, it's never worked out, especially when you use language that suggests you have nothing to do with it when in fact you're kind of a co-owner of it. And you don't really disclose that in the language of your tweets. And then, you were developing these games for the Coleco Chameleon or the Retro VGS, and it's just like, nothing against the guy, but Jesus fucking Christ, man, enough is enough. Come on. Let's move on with ourselves. Let's move on with our bodies.
Who is that?
It's
Gamester81.
It's Games for 81.
Same
I
guy
mean, he's a nice
who
guy.
kind of was tangentially working with what's his name?
Mike Kennedy.
Mike Kennedy. Was
Uncle
developing
That's the guy
games
that really
for
loved
it.
the Retron HD.
But
That's that guy, right? He loved the Retron HD. Told everybody how wonderful that
he
NES
loves
was.
every clone console that exists.
His YouTube content is now monopolized by doing really, poor reviews on terrible and endorsing really terrible clone equipment. And that's beside the point. The point
that's
is
a
that
total aside.
that's beside the point. The point is that he's I'm sure he's a really nice guy, and it's not saying anything necessarily bad about him, but it's why I don't know. Maybe I don't know. Maybe I don't know. Maybe I'm just really confused by all of this. I just don't know what to think.
I mean, if we switch the conversation a bit to the technical side of this console, the Phoenix, I think as much as I really don't care about this console, and I, obviously I was joking when I said I ordered a few of them.
You ordered the whole lot.
Yeah,
the $200 console, mind you.
Yeah. So, irregardless of the fact that you can get a Mega SG for cheaper and it's a whole lot more useful, I think the Phoenix has potential in the fact that the architecture is similar to some of those old arcade boards, like Zach was talking about earlier. There's nothing really fancy or custom about a ColecoVision, right? It's just an off-the-shelf TI VDP and a Z80 microprocessor and just a bit of glue logic in there. There's nothing fancy or special. There should be no reason why this isn't 100% accurate.
Right, because the technical manual and the dev manual for all of those TMS VDPs, the 9918 to the 9928 to when MSX took it over and they used it and they tuned it up for their computers. That's all. That information is all readily available. So there is no reason for that not to be absolutely cycle perfect accurate.
Exactly. So I would expect good hardware as long as there's a good designer behind it, obviously. But like you said, there's not a lot of room for opinion here if people do their research properly.
That's right.
I'm just fascinated by how the term FPGA has entered the markeing arena on everything. Like,
well, it's simulation.
It's synonymous with excellence.
Should we say that all of our SNES and Genesis cables are FPGA tested and verified? Because they are using an FPGA.
Oh, absolutely.
You'll sell more. Go.
Yeah, so weird.
So, all right, two things. Staying on topic, I guess, because I could go off on that. Ray Command just posted in the chat, if you're wondering about Collectorvision, look no further than the treatment of their backers during the Sydney Hunter Kickstarter. I don't remember that. Was it good or bad?
Yeah, I'm not sure anything about that. The only interaction I've had with the dude is I noticed that on their Kickstarter, they broke down how they plan to spend the $250,000 or whatever that they said is their goal for this thing.
Yeah.
Which is insanely high, it seems like, but
230. They've got 54,000 pledged of 230,000.
After how many days though?
That's 21 days to go. Yeah.
Yeah, they're not going to make. I'm sorry, I'm not being pessimistic, and I want everyone to succeed. This isn't a negative thing, but I just don't see I don't see the market appeal for something like that today. 3 years ago, sure. Today, no.
So they would need to hit like $8,000 a day
for every day, yeah, for 21 days.
So they would have to sell like 40 to 45 consoles or something. That's not going to happen.
I got a question. Is there a equivalent of this that's just software emulation, like a
Stella emulator?
Yeah. No. I mean like the Act Games Genesis. There's the crappy Genesis that's software emulated. Is there a version for this?
I don't think anybody
like an Atari Flashback or something.
Yeah, there's a Coleco Flashback. There's at least one of them.
How well does that do?
So there's a Coleco ASIC that's got a Z80 and the VDP
I'm
on there?
99% sure. Let me just Google it now because I'm 99% sure.
Yeah, someone
Yeah.
in the chat is saying that too. They have a flashback Coleco. I didn't know, but apparently.
Yeah, ColecoVision flashback. Yeah.
Is it a software like a CPU in there, or is it like some sort of like clone
It's cheap, so I don't I don't know.
Well,
Buy,
I mean,
Bob, buy one and make a review video out of it.
the Atari, the At Games Ataris, if I remember correctly, they have a 6509 or a 6507 and a TIA on board in a Riot. They have all the glue logic, they have all the Atari 2600 components, and a proprietary SLI case, and an ASIC, an LSI ASIC. So it wouldn't be. I mean, if it's At Games that's made the Coleco derivative of that, I'm sure that they've probably stuffed a Z80 and some RAM and a TS the 9918, I think.
Ace says
or
it's
28?
software emulation and it's composite video only.
Well, that's good. It should be.
Yeah. So I guess my main point was like, does that even sell like enough to warrant?
Yeah, that's the whole
This.
problem here with this, this thing from the beginning is I can't imagine the market for this is.
Not today. Not in today's climate.
Well, you could have realistic expectations of this because the market might not be 1 million, but if it's enough to back your Kickstarter campaign and they could actually pull it off, then everybody wins, right?
I feel a lot of retro gamers have the exact same attitude I have with respect to these older consoles. Is that I like to play retro games, but I go back to NES and Master System, and that's it. Anything before that is too primitive for me, and I find I have zero nostalgia for it. So I could really care less about Atari and even Commodore 64. I owned a Commodore 64 when I was a kid, and I try to play it sometimes. I have one here. Thank you, Jeremy, for sending it to me. But I can't get into it. I just feel it's missing some of that magic that the NES had. That was the good first video game console.
I can disagree with your ass on that one. But I agree with Renee, though. I don't think this is a generational issue. I don't think it's a matter of, well, you simply weren't old enough when the Coleco and the Atari were in their prime. I don't think that's it at all. A lot of these games are just too goddamn simplistic to sit down and to sort of revel as you do, like with something like Super Mario Brothers. It's not a generational thing. It's just, listen, I mean, let's just be honest.
I just was reading a thread on Atari Age the other day with a couple of old timers talking about how they can't get past Atari and Coleco because when they bought a Nintendo, it got too weird and complicated, and they went back to the simple games that they loved. So
maybe it is generational. Maybe
I'm the opposite. I have a TRS. You probably can't see. I got a TRS-80 back there that I had when I was growing up. I not my original. I just rebought it. I bought it specifically because I wanted to do a video on it because it wasn't a sellout clone console. It was something that would be a fun blast of nostalgia. But whenever I get around to it, I'm going to do the full restore of it. I'm going to do some add-ons, and then I'm going to get rid of it, give away, sell it, whatever I do, just because it's cool. It's an important piece of hardware. We couldn't be here without stuff like that. But what am I going to do? Sit here and write a basic program, save it to a cassette tape, and then play it back tomorrow? No, I'd rather go play Super Metroid.
That's right. So, I mean, I wish it all the best of luck. I just don't think it's going to go anywhere.
Yeah.
So
I'm sorry, I forgot to finish my thought. Got distracted, but the one interaction I had with the guy was after looking at his pie chart. I noticed a segment of that money was dedicated to testing and licensing. So I asked him what that was about, and they were actually planning to get that system properly HDMI licensed and tested. So I thought that was kind of interesting that they were. Now people seem to start thinking about going down that path. I don't think we're the only ones looking at that anymore.
So Steve said something, and I do have a kind of an important or a strong opinion on it, I guess. Maybe a kind of a snooty opinion on it. But you were joking around about, should you market your cables as tested on FPGA testing devices? And the truth is, if you look throughout history at things that are competing, that are equal in quality, the one that always wins is the one with the better marketing. Like, do you remember when Red Bull came out? There was another company that came out 6 months earlier that tasted way better, Of course you don't fucking remember the company because they went out of business a year after that because Red Bull destroyed them. And so it was, yeah, I would, my personal opinion on this is as long as you don't change what it is that you're doing, yeah, market it whatever you want. Dude, you could call it, whenever I finish the next album, you could call it like Norwegian ballet death blast metal. Put whatever title you want on it. If it'll get to more people, I'm not going to change the songs. I'm not going to change the way I dress. Call anything whatever you want. And that's why I think Chris Tabor is brilliant at marketing, or he's smart enough to hire and pay for brilliant marketing. Same thing, in my opinion, because it's just the analog stuff, they really hit the mark every time.
Well, that company came around, minus the bastardization of OG Famicom hardware to make the initial analog system. They, with the FPGA stuff, they came right at the perfect climate and sort of introduced their company in like the most ideal time in that era. So they, they got the jump on it, and that's great. I mean, but a lot of the stuff that you're seeing now, like the Collectorvision, it's just, I think it's a little too little, and it's certainly a little too late.
I just think the whole thing of just saying FPGA is just so bizarre to me, like that you wouldn't say like, oh, this is AVR CPU powered. Like it's just such a weird term. It's so new to people that they never heard it before.
That's right.
It always reminds me of
connotation of
blast processing, motherfucker. I knew you. Is that what you were gonna say, Renee?
No, it reminds me of something even earlier than that. In the original Terminator movie in 1984, when Kyle Reese is describing the Terminator to Sarah Connor, he says it's microprocessor controlled.
Yeah, fully armored combat chassis, microprocessor controlled. That's what he says.
And then if a side note here is when you see through the HUD from the Terminator's view,
it's Apple II code.
Yeah, there's disassembly listing in the side, and it's 6502 code.
Wow, that's awesome.
So yeah, HD Retrovision cables tested on FPGA hardware.
Just use the buzzword everywhere. And as Artemio said, we just need to add blockchain to the process.
Oh, is our Lord here?
Yes, he is.
Oh,
graced us with
Lord.
his presence.
Oh, that's so good.
I was about to just throw in the metal horns, but somebody the other day thought this meant the white power thing. I wanted to punch him in the face, but then I would have looked like the angry fucking Nazi white guy, so I just walked away. This is metal horns. Dio started that.
Yeah, but anyway, to answer Steve's point, I think the FPGA thing has been helped, again, largely by analog and marketing. I mean, that's why everyone wants to put that in the title of their project, because they've really put that at the forefront of their marketing effort to differentiate it from software emulation.
No, I've got to say, I found I can only paraphrase it, but one of the most recent tweets from the Analog Twitter account, I found a little abrasive and a little snobby concerning software emulation and
was it
or
their
hybrid
attack on
emulation.
Polymega?
I don't know if that was a direct attack.
It was. It had to.
Polymega is the only one that uses the term hybrid emulation, and I would be surprised if they hadn't trademarked that.
Yeah, that was a very Voltar thing to do, so there's no way that you could be fucking... There's no way that you could not approve of that. If you were Analog and you're watching Polymega say all this bullshit, delete posts on their Facebook, not answer questions from people that want to pre-order, and now your Analog was putting out a good and has put out good quality devices, Zach, that is absolutely a tweet that you would have sent directed exactly at that, and we all would have been behind you, high-fiving you.
That's why he's jealous.
Just block. Yeah. If you don't like it, just block me, bitch. Just block me.
The MiSTer FPGA is hybrid emulation. There you go.
MiSTer is?
Yeah.
Well, it's got It's using an Altera SoC, right? So there's an ARM9 on there plus FPGA, so that's hybrid. There we go.
So
There you
the
go.
MiSTer FPGA is hybrid emulation with blockchains.
That works.
So who here did order an analog Mega SG NT?
I ordered 2, as I did with the Super NT.
I'm getting 6 of them for free, so I can do reviews on my channel.
one of each color and 2 extra just to...
Because the color thing is the most important part.
Listen to me right now. You are at 1.4 something million. I just hit 50,500. I'm coming for you. Slowly but surely, I'm coming after you. So there you go. You watch your back.
All right. So one day, Bob, maybe they'll send you one. I doubt it, but maybe.
I'm actually pretty excited for the cartridge adapters they've got on there. Not because I'm going to buy any, but just because I think that means that my anybody who's already bought my Power-Based Minis, FM or not, that probably is going to work on the Mega SG.
Slightly unrelated, but related. There was the analog video output that was supposed to that module that was supposed to come out for the analog NT Mini or the Super NT Mini, or the Super NT, and also weren't there also supposed to be cartridge interfaces that were supposed to be released for the NT Mini as well?
Yeah, that didn't happen.
Sounds like neither of those things have happened.
So it was all. I'm trying to remember what I'm not supposed to say. What I'm supposed. All right. So Kevin's the only person making hardware for that company. All this money is going to marketing and not more people doing FPGA work. And I don't know the inner workings of the company. Maybe Kevin's like, I shall be the only designer. I don't know. It's none of my fucking business. But the bottom line is he's the only person doing the designs for these. And when one project stopped and another project started, there went all of the time for the accessories. So no cartridge adapters, no controller adapters, no analog RGB output adapter. My speculation is that the analog RGB component out was just because there was a time crunch on the other project. I would have guessed that if I were in Chris Tabor's shoes, I would not have wanted those cartridge adapters out. I would have wanted new products to support those other cores.
Yeah, obviously.
But if I were Chris, I also would have hired 2 other people to come in, spin off the pre-existing cores, and we would have had an Atari, a Coleco, a Game Gear, a Game Boy, a Nintendo, all those separate consoles. So once again, I'm just, I'm a fat dude drinking a beer in an apartment. I have no inner workings of their company. It's easy to judge somebody else when you're not in their shoes, but yeah, I totally understand one half, completely don't understand the other half of that.
Yeah, I don't understand any of it.
That's after spending 6 years in hardware product design and stuff, and like I could at least see the whole production chain of things. So I don't understand a lot of what they do.
Okay. Well, I mean, I didn't mean to go off on it to veer off the topic here. I was just, we're going to talk about obviously whatever the Sega Genesis thing is, and I'm just curious. Like, there was this other hardware that was supposed to come out because I know a lot of people were upset because they were to receive analog output capabilities of their thing, and they never got that, and they still haven't gotten that. And I think a lot of people were a little miffed about that. So I was just wanting maybe some clarification. Thank you, Bob, for being worthless yet again.
Maybe just priorities got shifted, and that analog thing, they want to make it work on both of these things.
That's right. That's possible. And that's
so
reasonable.
They wanted to get that in the pipe into production, and then Kevin's time could be freed up to finish that.
That's very reasonable. That's very reasonable.
It's hard to juggle that priority.
Isn't it remarkable? All of this stuff, all of these things are kind of blooming out. Like, we're getting an overabundance of just about everything that sort of relies on CPLDs and FPGAs. My God, look at the current landscape for GameCube digital solutions. I mean, you have so many different permutations of this, the GameCube, the GC video, whatever they call it. Everyone kind of has their own little moniker or name for it, but just look at that technology has afforded and made like 1,000 different versions of that same thing possible. Like, you have so many vendors that are offering that now. I mean, GameCube HDMI or GameCube digital output should not be hard for anybody to get now.
Yeah, I mean, Eon really pretty much paved the way for it because they were the first people to do it correctly, I guess. Now there's Insurrection.
Just to finish a product.
Yeah. Well,
but Eon's a perfect example.
Zelda
right?
finished
Because...
a product.
Oh,
right.
Yeah, right. I could finish a shit too, but it's not really something worth selling. No, but I mean, Eon's the perfect example, right? They stepped up to the plate. They charged more, but they marketed the shit out of that thing. They're at trade shows. They're everywhere. And Insurrections just came out, so this is absolutely not a dig at all against Insurrection. But you knew about Eons the moment it was released. Anybody that even Googled GameCube, you saw an ad for Eons. But it's more expensive. So that kind of goes back to what we were saying before is, Insurrection's doing pretty much the exact same thing for a lot cheaper, but I don't know how many people even know they exist.
There's also some like really shitty looking ones out there now. Like
some really bad ones.
It just seems like somebody with a really low quality 3D printer sitting in their basement printing these off and throwing them up on eBay. I can't even remember the names of all the ones I've seen.
Well, I know. I like it. There's a HDM My Cube is one seller on eBay.
Yeah.
That doesn't necessarily. I'm not saying anything bad or good about it, but God, there are so many of these, and because there are so many of these, and there's this evidently there's serious saturation here with this little GameCube thing. Can any of these people, if you don't have a product now, and you hope to have a GameCube product in the next 2 or 3 months? Can you stand to get into this game and even stand to make any money, much less recoup your costs?
I think the only opening on GameCube at this point is the analog solution, which is not out yet. Mm-hmm. Nobody's touched that.
Well, Dan's doing that though. Danny, are you?
Oh yeah, I'm talking about.
He's here. He's in the chat, and it's already open sourced, I believe. But I don't know if anybody's in production with it. But yeah, Dan and Greg destroyed that market in a good way. Anybody that was thinking they could come up with a device and sell it for $250, gone.
Yeah, I was talking specifically about the plug and play things. Yeah, obviously there's.
Okay, I understand. So I think that I think we have seen the pinnacle of this GameCube thing, and now it's just a matter of if you were an early adopter and you started doing this stuff, and you've had stuff out for the past month or so, you're probably pretty good. But I think all of these people that are now jumping on or still don't have a product but are wanting to get in on this, I think it's over. I think that it's it is what it is now.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that's that's about right. I think
that's right.
There will still be people that can pop up and make a buck here or two on eBay, but like to actually make serious money on this is just getting too crowded. But
the reason I ask this is because it's kind of interesting. I received an email maybe 2 weeks ago. Somebody, really nice guy, kind of a new guy to all of this, and he was asking me, it's starting to be a little tacked now, this GameCube thing, but do you think there would be any value for me personally if I threw my hat into the ring and kind of entered the GameCube market of digital and analog video solutions? And I was very candid with him. I said, I don't think so. I think that, it's too little too late. I think that there's already a steady supply of vendors and people who are making this readily available for everybody, and it wouldn't. I don't see it being financially viable for anyone. So to my friend who asked that to other people, there are other things that you can do with your life. What do you think, Bob?
That's actually like so many people asked us to do GameCube stuff, and we knew that so many people were working on it, and that everybody would jump on it, and we're just like, no.
Yeah.
We have other stuff to focus on.
I have kind of a snotty opinion, a shitty opinion, whatever derogatory term you want to use on that stuff. And the truth is, I I like the GameCube. I don't love it. I thought playing GameCube through the Wii, even before the Wii Dual, even you got one of the better versions of the Wii. It was a perfectly good solution. I couldn't give a shit about the GameCube if it wasn't for the Game Boy interface stuff. And now with Woozle's adapter coming out, I don't know, 2010, 2020, whatever, whenever he gets there. He's still working in college. I'm only teasing. But once through HDMI, that's fine. I'm going to use that version. But I still love to play, obviously, on RGB monitors. And that's why I want any kind of GC video or RGB solution. It's for the Game Boy interface software. It's not for GameCube games, which is why I've appreciated and enjoyed all of these HDMI plug-and-plays, but I won't use one. I want an analog one that I could plug in, have some kick-ass RGB output, and be able to play on my BVM and enjoy all that awesomeness on an analog monitor, not digital.
Then why just not buy a PAL GameCube?
It's the output's a little fuzzier. I never understood why. I didn't have time to do a full analysis on it. It could just be the same as when Zach and I were doing one-chip testing and, bypassing off the board, getting a sharper image. Maybe it's just interference off the motherboard. But whatever it might be, every capture I've ever taken off of, official GameCube cables modded for RGB or even in component, looked sharper than good shielded cables, not junk, AliExpress ones, but it looked sharper than a PAL GameCube running the Game Boy interface stuff.
Well, that's interesting. Steve, do you have any comments on that?
No.
The only thing I'll add to that is I've only tested 3 or 4, so that's why I haven't made a big deal about this. I've learned my lesson many times over, and that, there's a million of these. I tested 3 or 4, so I can't put on the website, don't ever use a PAL GameCube for this. It's just...
I think it would be interesting on the same PAL GameCube to try the official component cable versus our SNES cable in 240p mode. How are they different? That's like the most controlled experiment I guess you could do.
I would wager to bet, Bob, that the majority of I could be way off on this, but the majority of the people, you have 2 groups really. I think you have the people who want the digital or the analog. They want better video for their GameCube. It's either for Super Smash Brothers because they like to run that game and play that game, or it's for the Game Boy crowd.
I'm sorry, I'm laughing because I had a Smash player. You ever remember Mac people from the 90s? Why would you use a PC? One of that same weird accent was why would you use RGB? It adds lag. Smash players don't use RGB. I was just like, what do you... So, yeah. I know that's one out of the entire Smash community, but I'll never forget that one. That one kind of cracked me up. But,
okay, Bob. Whatever. We can go on, Nick. We can move on, Nick.
Sorry.
It's still a fucking waste of time, Bob. Jesus, why do I even fucking do this thing anymore?
I just pulled the rug out from under it. God damn it.
Anyhow, what were you saying, Zach?
No, I was just saying. I think really the interest for the GameCube, the desire and interest to improve and to cheapen your video quality and make it more obtainable is either for people who competitively play Super Smash Bros. Or people who have people for the Game Boy player. I don't see who gives a shit about Luigi's Mansion and 480p. I do, but I have a Wii for that, and oh god, the Wii looks so much worse. Well, whatever. It doesn't bother me.
The Wii Dual, biatch. Just because I screwed up the capture doesn't mean it doesn't look better.
I don't believe in you, Bob. I saw that video, and you're really dishonest. So
after all the millions that Dan sent me to make that video, there you go.
You're really kind of a cunt.
Clearly, I took a payoff. I've already been scolded for my language, Zach. You can't say those words.
Sorry,
this is
I
not
forgot.
a child-friendly podcast.
Okay, so anyways,
now I have to use that.
But it's run by children.
Yeah.
Fair and true.
So let's see, what else do we have to talk about tonight? I guess also in the cabling crowded universe, the Pound Technologies is releasing PlayStation 2 cables through limited run games.
I always get it mixed up. Is that the company that's let me just so I don't libel myself. Allegedly totally ripped off the fucking Konami bacon strips logo, allegedly. Is that the pound company? I look at their logo and it's like, what is this, Konami 2001? For God's sakes.
Yes, I think so.
Oh yeah.
Pound my pussy. What a bunch of shit.
Monochrome Konami.
Yeah. Totally looks
That
like
is
a
the
rip off
same.
of it. Yeah. Yeah, it's I asked well, so the interesting thing about this cable is that it's, as you might know, our cable is marketed towards PS2 and PS3, right? But they are marketing their cable as a PS1, PS2 cable.
Cool.
So why is this interesting? Because me and Steve looked for a long time at ways of getting 240p over HDMI, right? And a lot of these chips just don't do it or give us problems. So we were wondering, had they found a chip that successfully does that and takes the 240p out of the PS1 and spits out an HDMI signal that was compatible with TVs, but it turns out that they're jamming a scaler in it. I actually was talking to Josh over at Limited Run Games yesterday and asked him, because they did a stream with the cable, and he was telling me it's coming out 720p. So they have some scaler in it. I think Steve might know or have a guess at to which scaler is in there.
Yeah, so most of these RGB/YPVPR to HDMI solutions are from a company called Macro Silicon. They make a single chip that has an analog front end and a HDMI driver on it. And there's two kinds of the main Macro Silicon chips. One that just takes what comes in and spits it out, HDMI. And then there's ones that do a scale to 720p/1080i and spit it out, the HDMI. And so if you go on Amazon and type in like YPVPR to HDMI box, there's these boxes that do the conversion, and there's the non-scalar version. You pop it open. Oh, it's the Macro Silicon chip that doesn't do scaling. And then there's the one that's colored. Well, the first one's colored like blue, like has blue accents on the box. And then there's another one that has like gold accents on the box. Pop that open. There's a 720p 1080i button on it too. Pop that open. Oh, it's the Macro Silicon chip with the scaler. And so what it sounds like, based on what Nick's got from Josh when talking to him, that they're using the scalar version because in our experience, the scalar chip, it can recognize 240p coming in, processes it at 480i and scales it up. So you have two main problems with this. If this is the chip that is being used, is a lot of lag on this guy, a lot of input lag, and the 240p effects will show up as like a combed, like you have the alternating lines when something's flashing really fast. So the 240p 60 hertz effects will be distorted.
That box also does that glitch thing, right, with the Super Nintendo, where every once in a while it kind of has like a jump effect, or am I thinking of a different box?
I don't remember. I have it here somewhere.
Steve, did you test lag on any of those?
On which?
Any of those HDMI scalers, the YPVPR to HDMIs?
Like measured the lag?
Yeah.
No, I just felt that it was terrible. On the scalar version. On the other version, it's just, there's no memory, so it's passing it through.
Because my first thought on this stuff is always like, for a few dollars more, it could be done so much better. But at the end of the day, if it doesn't take away from the experience, so if it processes 240p as 480i and then scales that, yeah, all right, that sucks. It's annoying. But if it doesn't add any lag, you know what?
No,
if it's $20, it might be a great solution for people getting their feet wet. But
I'm not super sensitive to lag, but I definitely felt it on that. And again, let me preface this with
We don't have a
preface.
cable, yeah.
Like, this is based on what I know about these macrosilicon chips and what the standalone conversion box that I've messed with that does take in 240p and spits out the 720p signal out the back.
Because we
I've
have
never
messed.
found one of those that didn't add a shitload of lag.
We have.
There was no lag for me. I played a fighting game.
I'll tell you how I tested it. I played the fucking game. That's I still love that so much.
We have tested
somebody
the.
in the chat asked. Sorry, Nick. I'm gonna ask this and then you answer because I keep cutting you off 5 times in a fucking row.
That's right.
Somebody in the chat said, "Can you guys explain why so many devices process 240p as 480i?" I think that's a worthy question.
It's a worthy
Nick?
question that's been answered maybe 4 billion times. But Nick, please.
Because
I'm just
240p isn't a real thing; it's a hack of 480i. So, I mean, if your device is interpreting that timing signal incorrectly, just gonna.
Yeah, 240p just was a cheap way back in the 80s for computer manufacturers and video game companies to create graphics on your screen without using any more bandwidth or less bandwidth, right? So, if you think of your television screen back in the day, it takes 2 fields to draw the screen. Well, 240p is one of those 2 fields. One of those fields are just dropped. So you've got a field that's dropped altogether. Some TVs just don't know how to interpret that. Where's the second field? Oh, I don't know. Let's just make one up because we're just like I was going to make a really bad George Soros joke, but anyways. So that's what it is. I mean, that's why 240p exists. It's just a cheap way to get things on the screen and not use up a bunch of bandwidth, and it's more forgiving for. It was more forgiving for the hardware back then.
It's so you could have the 60 frames per second effect.
Too.
Effectively.
Yep. That's right.
Yeah.
Good answer.
Cool.
Excellent answer, Zach.
I thought the most interesting part of this was how this cable is exclusive to
limited run.
Yeah, I thought that was very bizarre.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe just there's something going on with Josh. I think posted on either the Limited Run Games Twitter or his own Twitter something about it's going to make sense why they're releasing this cable on their site because maybe there's something else they're doing. That I have no inside information on. He didn't tell me anything about that, just some tweet I saw of his. So I don't know. But
I still just think it's funny that none of these companies ever, they probably never even guessed that these would be used for video games. And I imagine if they just probably spent, 1 day's worth of talking about this, they probably could have designed these things slightly different to compensate,
Yeah, like actually one thing with the reason why we know these macrosilicon chips is we've been trying to get a cheap pass-through HDMI thing like for a while. Like I don't know if people might remember we tried doing some goofy thing where we were using like PS2 HDMI things that had a chip that could do 240p inside, and we're breaking them out into just component jacks. And that was like at the end of 2016 or something.
Mm-hmm.
And we've been trying to look for stuff for a long time, and we found these macrosilicon chips. We found a company that was willing to look into this stuff, but what it turned out happening is macrosilicon doesn't give you access to the firmware. Like if you want them to do something differently, then you have to ask them to implement it, and then they give you the firmware, and then they would distribute that firmware to everybody. So like we were kind of going down this path where they're like, oh yeah, we could do it, and they give me this thing, and the 240p is all messed up, like really bad, and I send them all these scope plots. I'm like, why it's bad, and I didn't realize that I wasn't dealing with the contract manufacturer, but I was giving the contract manufacturer data, and then they were giving it to macrosilicon, and the macrosilicon was implementing or trying to fix their stuff in their base firmware, and then all their customers who use macrosilicon chips would get all that. So all this technical research I was providing them to help them fix this stuff would then go to all these competitors. Eventually we just, because they couldn't yield any good results, like me and Nick were like, we'll just kill this and just do everything on our own where we have control and we could actually like implement this stuff correctly. Because I don't think these people knew what they were doing really.
Yeah. By what they gave us, definitely not.
Yeah, and like not understanding like kind of what I was talking about, and so I didn't really want to like develop their code for their bazillion custom.
Right.
Really.
Jeez, Bob, could you type any louder?
Sorry, I'm usually muting. I usually remember to mute myself when I do that. I'm not Zach or anything.
Yeah, Bob, why don't you just try to go off yourself? Don't forget to do that later.
I can't drink any faster, Zach.
But they're not putting
the
that
11% alcohol ones.
They're not putting that scalar chip in their other products.
Devices, cables.
Yeah, so like the Xbox and Dreamcast, it's just this PlayStation.
Yeah, because anything that did for 240p would get like rejected by the pass-through version.
So had they just marketed this cable towards PS, they might not have dumped that scaling version of the chip in there.
Yeah, maybe it'd have been a little more generic.
Right, but then it wouldn't have worked on PS1 games.
Right. Yeah.
Right. That's
so
the caveat.
but it would work on PS2 480i, PS2 480p, 576p, 1080. Wait, there is no 576p on PS2. Never mind.
Mm-hmm. You only wish that. Oh, somebody was trying to argue with me the other day, and I don't know. You both of you boys, both Bob and Steve, you stand firm that the 240p analog output of to the best of your knowledge, of the DataPath E1 and E1S is in fact bandwidth crippled.
So in my testing,
because
that was based on Steve's recommendation. Yes, you were there. We did this, live on a Skype chat together one night. However, a few different people that I spoke to said that they've gotten wildly different results based on firmware, and you can't downgrade. So
I downgraded my card.
How?
You can change the firmware. You can reflash the firmware on your card.
The driver or the firmware?
No, the firmware, because if I go and install an old driver, it requests that I flash the card back.
Really?
Yeah, that's right. It does for me. I know that. I know that for a fact. But someone sent me an email, and they weren't rude or anything, but they were like, I saw this, you guys were talking about this, and what you're not doing is and this, I thought this was thoroughly explained. I didn't want to be rude, but they're like, you have to manually dial in the resolution of the console into the Vision window settings, and you have to manually manipulate the phase, which is, I guess, for them, that makes everything hunky-dory and perfect.
Yeah, and I know. Cruz was one of the people that told me. Tech was one of the people, and then somebody else that I've never met in person that I was just Skyping with. And I sent them screenshots, and they said mine doesn't look like that. So it must have been the drivers we were using. I didn't know that the driver and the firmware matched, though.
Yeah,
I didn't realize that. It's totally my fault. I'll go back and reinstall a much older driver and then check again. Because I know Tech definitely had a card that everything was processed perfectly on 240p.
But
so.
I still don't think people should be capturing at the 320. Like I know it's hard to understand, and you probably need like a nice, well-written article to lay it out. But you don't just see what the console's internally generating in terms of horizontal pixels and plug that into the capture software. If you understood like how this works, it makes zero sense. That's not what you want to do.
Well, I don't fully understand how it works, but I understand how you taught me to test it. So there you go, Steve. I'll give you that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Steve.
All right, let's see what else we have left to talk about. Probably won't
Should we,
get
should
to
we go
this.
into,
Yeah, what's up?
should we go to questions?
Well, wait a minute. Wait
Yeah.
a minute. Hold on. I just want to say one thing though. We were talking about PlayStation. Do we at least not want to mention that was kind of interesting that the different PlayStation revisions, the old GPU and the newer GPUs having like there's a pretty big difference in quality there. Do we not want to spend 3 minutes on that? Bob, you could talk about that for 3 minutes.
Yeah,
I
talk
would love
about it.
to if we have enough time. No,
Yeah, go
Zach,
for it.
you got to drive this ship. It's all you.
I say go for it.
I'm not driving the ship, Bob. Just fucking talk about it. Jesus.
It's called steering the ship. God.
Yeah, Bob. Bob, fly the freaking boat.
Yeah.
I
So
like
basically what it is and I don't quite understand what the differences are. But Bob sent an article a long time ago about the graphics output of the PS1. The first rev of the publicly available hardware was compared against PlayStations that had the newer GPU. And it was interesting to see that in gradient comparisons where you go through different shades of gray or different shades of a particular color, the old PlayStation GPU, you could literally see the steps in the graduations between in the gradients, while with the newer GPUs it was so smooth and very well blended. And me and Steve talked about this a few years ago, like the PS2 emulator, the PlayStation 1 emulator that runs on the PlayStation 2 for the GPU side. If you play a game like Metal Gear Solid and you're in the vents are very dark, like the gamma is way fucking off or something in the vents.
And you see the steps.
And you see the graduations of that. And my thinking was when Bob sent this article, which Bob, if you want to link that into the chat, you can. The article showing that people can look at to see the screen comparisons, because it's really quite compelling.
Well, definitely send it to me so I can add it to the description in the video.
And for the record, Super G was the one that sent me this. I can't claim this one, but continue.
Okay, cool. So what was interesting was not just the stark contrast and quality difference between the old PS1 and the newer PS1s, but I was thinking, maybe that's why the PlayStation 2 with certain games has weird idiosyncrasies for PlayStation 1 titles. Maybe it's because the wrapper that they wrote to handle or the PS1 GPU interpreter that runs on the PS2 is based on a really, really old die of the PS1, and that's why a lot of those quirks exist on the PS2's PS1 emulator, but not really on newer PlayStation 1 revisions. And I thought that was, I don't know if those guys in that forum even thought of that, but my mind immediately went to that, and I thought that was really interesting. So yes, just to quickly summarize, there is a difference in quality, a measurable visual difference in quality between the first generation GPU on the PlayStation 1 and subsequent releases of the PS1. Seriously, check it out. It's pretty cool.
And you're not saying just on the PS2, PS1 emulation, but in the PS3. So
everything.
Everything
Vita
else had this problem, and so maybe they just kept rolling that forward.
Yeah, so what I think happened was for the PSP, for the Vita, for the PlayStation 3, everything that had a PS1 emulator running on top of it, I think that they just side ported this code to all of these different architectures, and the reason it's fucked up on them all is because they're using their GPU wrapper is based on a buggy first rev problematic GPU PS1 GPU core. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's possible. I would like to get my hands on the one of these old motherboards just to check it.
They're rare, but there were two mainboard revisions of the SCPH 1000 series in the States. The PU7 and the PU8. Now, most likely, if you have an audio file, it's going to be a PU8. But if you have a PU7, that is going to be the revision that has the older, the old GPU. That's what you want to look out for.
Yeah, when you say audiophile, you mean the ones that have the RCA
RCA
jacks.
in the back.
Yeah.
That's correct. So, anyways,
Well,
No,
So
it's
the-
cool.
The only thing I could add to this is I did some basic testing years ago, objective, not subjective. I took screenshots and shit like that, and I couldn't find one that was, much sharper than another. So there's no scenario like the original SNES versus the one-chip SNESs. But this is something that I never tested, and I'm pretty excited to at least dig into. But when I was playing through Symphony of the Night, I think I've talked about this, so I'll skip to the end. Played it on PlayStation 1 CD, on PlayStation 3, yes, with all the stupid filters turned off. Played the PlayStation Network download. The CD looked like garbage. The download looked great. And then I played it on a PS2 Slim through the OSSC. Looked ridiculous. Like, good. And then I played it on a PS1, the PS1 minis. And it looked identical. So wouldn't I have seen a difference if this was true? Or maybe I just wasn't looking for it.
I think, yeah, these are weird graphical glitches that occur in certain spots. So if you're not paying attention to that, it's not going to be noticeable. Like, you typically look at like stuff on the analog side, like when stuff is converted to an analog video signal, but this is like on the graphical side where the digital video
drawing.
Yeah.
You can't take a generic screenshot of a game from this system and then the same generic screenshot on this system and compare them. This is there's sort of a corner case basis where certain conditions have to be met for you to see this difference or phenomena.
Yeah, it's like
it's
this type of texture is drawn in this way, then this could pop up, but if it's not, then they'll look identical. Like,
yeah, Bob just sent a link in there, and you can see the screenshots in there. Like the Tomb Raider screenshots are quite compelling, and a guy wrote a piece of software that exercises the GPU in a certain way that really sort of fleshes this out. And my God, it's like, holy cow, man! It's a pretty big difference. But at any rate, there you have it. So pretty cool stuff. Now we can go to questions, I guess, about my body.
Two quick things. The thing I want to determine is having a PS2 Slim with a mod chip in it. So far, is still my favorite solution for everything PS1 and 2 related. I realize the few incompatibilities, but you get a lot for that. You get a lot. But the other thing before we go to questions is I just want to make sure that everybody in the chat that uses the data path and is saying I don't have this problem is testing the same. So don't change your driver or firmware version. Leave it alone. Download the HD Retrovision test software for either SNES or Genesis. Use any, I would assume, RGB or HD Retrovision.
I would say if you could do the Genesis, it would be better because it has more pixels per line, and so those lines are finer.
Yeah. Also, it would be important to
The problem happened with SNES too, though. If you have the choice, do Genesis for Steve's reasons. But just if you only have a SNES with a ROM card or the ability to flash a ROM, then you could see the results as well. Would you even see this with composite or S-Video?
I think it would already be super blurred in the first place.
That's what I would expect. So RGB or component.
What something else that's kind of important too is document your firmware and the driver that you're running before you do anything. That way
driver, all of your individual settings. Use the vision capture window, not because it's the best, but just because everybody that has the card will have that software installed. And it's the bandwidth test, meaning it's the one that's stripes, white, black, white, black, white, black. So yeah.
Right.
But yeah, please, anybody that claims that they don't have this issue, but email me, hit me up on Twitter if you don't know my email address or something, because I would love to get to the bottom of this, because a lot of people that I trust say I do not have this problem. So if that's the case, I want to figure out why, so we could all be on the right driver, the right settings, etc.
So how do you determine the driver and the firmware? Is that easily
Through the device manager.
Yeah, I think
both the firmware and the driver in the device manager?
I'm sure you can grab the hardware ID and you can grab all that information in the advanced properties of the device manager to tell you
the hardware ID
the firmware
based on firmware.
Well, not the hardware ID, but well, I can tell you right now.
Yeah, I'm trying. Getting there. You're probably gonna beat me.
Well, I don't have it installed here. Not in the hardware ID, but I'm sure in the drop down there, the firmware changes too, and you can see that.
So the driver date and driver version are right in device manager, and I'm looking for firmware. I don't know if you.
It's going to be in advanced, Bob. Go to the last tab and pull the drop down. There's a firmware ID tab there or something there. I'm sure that'll have the firmware. But if
Jose says every driver package comes with a different firmware.
Right. If the driver is married to the firmware, then you can probably just be okay to rely on the driver, right? Because the driver requires you to flash the firmware to its own firmware. So that's a corresponding thing. It should be fine.
So do you have access to all the old drivers? Is that on their website?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because I ran a bunch of them. And I don't know why Bob's saying you can't change your firmware. You can't backdate your firmware.
He was saying if you have the newest driver, but just downgrade the firmware.
Yeah, I've never seen a way to specifically downgrade the firmware as you would like, a console or something. But if Jose says it's when you install the older driver, the older firmware installs with it, then that's a moot point. Then there you go.
Okay, well, it doesn't matter. The point is we got people on it. Let's do some tests. Let's see about this.
Let me see if I still have the capture to show what the wrong thing looks like.
Well, while you're doing that, Nick, how about we go to questions from our wonderful audience of 135 people, by the way. Thank you guys for coming to see just me.
Hell yeah, thank you guys.
Yeah, we were up in the 150s at one point.
Yeah. Until Zach started speaking.
Yeah. How much did those? Until Zach and Bob started talking about data path.
Are we using the super chat money to pay for those bots too?
Yeah, that's right.
Please learn from me.
Speaking of which, I have catching up to do on the super chats. Yord, I'm gonna guess is how you pronounce his name. Yord Hoff sent us money. Just said thanks. Bubba Matt sent us 2 more super chats. One, he was asking if we listen to music while we play games or we listen to the game audio.
I always listen to the game audio.
It depends on what I'm playing. If I'm playing something like TF2 where I'm just dropping in and I want to have fun and own some people, I'll listen to Joe Rogan's music.
Game audio all the time.
Yeah,
he did say that he listens to Megadeth and Slayer, so at least he's got good tastes. He's overriding.
But I don't like overriding certain situations. Like that's one of the reasons why I don't listen to music while I run either.
Yeah, I'm the same.
Yeah.
I do, but you're afraid of getting hit by a car because you're a loser.
I mean, even indoors, I don't.
Casey wants to know our experience with the other pound cables on the market. I've talked about the Xbox on this podcast before. I thought it looked a lot worse than just a generic, good quality generic third-party component cable that I have for Xbox lying around. It had quite a bit of noise to it that was pretty distracting, at least to me anyway. This is like noise that would scroll across the screen, and colors were a little bit more, I guess, tinted incorrectly. Steve just reminded me, because I totally forgot, when I was back home for a funeral, right after the funeral I came over to the lab and we were testing the Dreamcast ones. I totally forgot that I did this. So that one wasn't that great either, though the details of it are a bit more fuzzy to me.
I think it had the same kind of noise problems.
Same kind of scrolling noise, and then it was.
I think a lot. I think a lot of it is the cord between the console and the little box, and that's why, even though those generic converters I was talking about, so like in terms of Xbox, those generic converter boxes that don't do the scaling, the Porta box with the blue tints colors on it, has the same macro silicon chip that this pound Xbox thing is. So if you have something with a good high quality component cable, because that's all the pound cable is doing, is taking the component, going through the macro silicon and giving it HDMI. If you took a good quality analog cable and ran it into this box, I mean, you still have to externally power it, but you could probably power it from the TV's service USB upgrade port, and then HDMI. I think it'll get a lot better quality doing that.
Wow.
Yeah, it was also, was it something about like the black levels were kind of off?
Yeah, it was. That's why you could see a lot of the noise too, because
right, it's just overly brightened.
Yeah, so like it's a little gray when it's black, and so you could see a lot of the scrolling stuff better.
It's the exact same noise I saw when I tried that Wii. I think it was a Hyperkin one. Which, by the way, Hyperkin now is like totally going after Pound so hard, just blatantly ripping off these cables.
But they all use the same macrosilicons.
Yeah.
It's like so ubiquitous. Is that the word?
Ubiquitous, yeah.
Ubiquitous.
Yeah.
It.
Cool. So yeah, that's that question. Let's got the ones from comment section in previous weeks. I have a question about sync. Is there any advantage to getting C-Sync straight from the console at the source with proper RGB video output and cables, as opposed to running sync on a composite cable through a separate sync stripper? For example, hooking several consoles up with sync on composite RGB cables to a SCART switcher with a sync stripper like G-SCART to convert the signal before it gets to CRT would be money saved on not having to get C-Sync cables for each individual console.
Anytime oh Jesus Christ, anytime you generically use an 1881 or a sync stripper across the board like that, that is a terrible idea. And the problem too, a lot of the times, is I've opened up a couple of these. You know, you've got two really main cable makers right now for SHART, and from one of them I opened up two of their cables.
I would argue three now.
Okay, maybe three now currently. I'm sorry. I don't mean to let anyone out, but
forgot about Industrial Industries.
Oh yeah, Industrial Industries. I guess they make cables, but at any rate, I opened up one of those cables that's okay. I can run composite video on all these consoles, and at the end of my chain, boom, hit a sync stripper, boom, I'm in the business, boom, 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 headshot. Well, I opened up one of those cables, and the sync stripper was there, but the video wasn't attenuated properly. The video coming out of the stream, the sync signal coming out was 5 volts. It was nothing but bad. And you really have to tailor. People think that you just put the sync stripper in there and you're done. You really have to tailor that 1881 on a console by console basis. You just can't blindly, if you're going to shove it into something and have it work optimally. If your idea of using composite sync is to get rid of some of that noise that you get when you do composite video on a shitty cable that's not shielded very well, you're absolutely getting no value in putting a sync stripper at the end of that video, at the end of that transmission line anyways. So that's a total waste of money and time. If the goal is just to get a signal that agrees with whatever fucking archaic scaler or device that you're using, because the OSSC and the FrameMiSTer and all those things now, they don't discriminate between composite video and composite sync. But at any rate, if your goal is just to get a composite sync signal, use what's in the console at all times if you can. If you can, use what the console gives you. That is shaped perfectly for that system.
You should only use the sync separators as a last resort.
Sure.
And a lot of times people don't realize when that last resort is, and it's only like if you have equipment that requires like a logic level
that's right,
type sync without any video information on it, then that's typically where you would need to use it as a last resort. But yeah, like you said, you only want to use it as a last resort because it adds a lot of distortion that's unrecoverable once you process it through a sync separator. Like those typical analog sync separators that we talk about, you get delay. so your picture shifts relative to where the sync is, and then you have a possibility of a lot of jitter being added. So it's you want to avoid it whenever you can.
That's right. That's right. And it's unfortunate that cable makers. I'll be very candid. Cable makers have only started to handle composite sync, I would consider appropriately, within the past year. All cable makers, I don't care who they are, from a year beyond today, we're talking 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, those composite sync cables, more often than not, are built very electrically incorrectly. And so you should revisit those cables anyways and get those tuned up appropriately. And you don't need a sync stripper unless, certain switchers like the cross point. But even then, you don't need a sync stripper to interface to interface a lot of these systems to that to those cross-point switching devices that require a 5-volt CMOS or TTL level sync signal. You don't even need a sync stripper for that. You just need someone to build the cable appropriately for your setup. Doesn't need a sync stripper.
I think for me personally, my opinion on this stuff is as long as you know a decent modder or you can mod your own stuff, it's cheaper to do it right than it is to do it other ways. So if you have an Extron crosspoint and you require C-Sync, the only scenario that's a little funky is PS2, because those are some really small pins that you got to solder. So find maybe a sync stripper in that, or send it to a professional modder to have it done. But can you really think of any other console that isn't either just all you need is the correctly built cable or an easy mod?
For what exactly, Bob?
To get true C-Sync. A PAL SNES, maybe, but
you need to define what true C-Sync is.
Yeah, what do you define?
Composite sync without any other information on the line, making it compatible with equipment that is not compatible with anything other than just a clean sync line. So they have strong cross points.
So there's 3 different things. There's what you said, no video information on it, just the sync part, and then there's the voltage swing and source impedance. Those are all, you need to characterize all those before we can even answer your question.
Right. So come on, Bob, get to it.
So point still is, you could just order cables for most of the consoles out there, and it will work with your crosspoint and all your other equipment. Anybody that's using something that requires TTL should know what they're doing anyway. It shouldn't be a casual user shouldn't be using stuff that requires that. And other than that leaves PS2 and PAL SNES and PAL GameCube, right? I can't think of any other thing that doesn't have a C-Sync output.
Well, Bob. Yeah, I mean, that's basically it. I mean, and if it doesn't, some systems don't necessarily, like the PC Engine.
PAL Saturn? Doesn't that also... Sorry to interrupt. It just popped in my head.
Okay,
that could be.
The PAL Saturn and the PC Engine, its composite sync slices out, or it swings... Yeah, the composite sync on all PC engines swing out at about 900 millivolts or 800 millivolts with some DC on there. So if you were to come to me and say, "Dear Lord, I need a composite sync cable that I'm going to interface with my Extron crosspoint," as you know, that needs to be a logic level signal so that it triggers properly. Can you help me? Yes. I will build a buffer for your system or for your cable that will drive that 800 millivolt signal past the 2.5 volt threshold and will shape the impedance out correctly. That way, that cable will be perfectly tailored to work with your PC Engine, and it will work perfectly well when you couple it to equipment that requires logic level signals. No sync stripper, no nonsense, and it's done correctly, and you don't have any of the problems. That's the person you need to find. If the person that you need to find says, "Well, we need to put a sync strip in," that you need to get the fuck away from them. You need to back the fuck away. What you described is exactly what Renee's graphics booster does. Is it?
it doesn't do the sync separating technique. It amplifies linearly the sync signal back up to logic level swings.
Right. That's right. I don't know.
Smart
I don't know.
bitches.
I think
I don't know what accent that was, but that's the answer. Find somebody that really knows what they're doing, and this isn't a problem. That's what it comes down to. It's not a problem in your butt.
Yeah, that wasn't at all a British accent, right?
No, that was Australian.
I thought that was a Kentucky accent.
No, I was trying to do Australia, mate, because I've been watching a lot of Mad Max, mate.
You know that wasn't his voice, right? They dubbed Mel Gibson's voice in that movie.
No, they
All right,
didn't.
we got one more question, which I don't know if we're going to even be able to answer. But
Mate.
related to the whole hardware versus software discussion, what needs to be done for hardware encoders to rival something like the slow setting on H.264? Is the advantage of hardware encoding its ability to more efficiently handle more data-rich color spaces?
What the hell are you talking about?
I'm not sure what this question is.
Like an
Is
OBS
it
question?
Is that a question of like why you have dedicated hardware to do like encoding and stuff? Like back in the day when computers had the DVD drives and they were doing DVD decoding, they had like an MPEG-2 board like in a PCI slot that would that's where all the video would pipe through onto this hardware MPEG-2 decoder, and why that is able to process more data than the CPU itself. Is that kind of what the question is? Does that make sense? I said?
I think
I think I know what he's asking.
I think we should just have that person re-ask their question.
Yeah, yeah.
And
that's right, mate.
And we'll try to have a back and forth in the comments if they do.
Or
I'm not sure.
restate it, and we can answer it on the future.
Right, yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I think that about does it, unless anyone else has anything they wanted to talk about.
Let's talk about boys.
I think we can... The next time we get together and do this, we may either be talking about Paprium, having come out or having totally missed its deadline again.
Having been delayed.
Nick, come on, dude.
Get your fucking dogs in order, Nick.
Right?
Doggy, where are you,
I don't
Doggy?
know what he's doing.
Doggy. I don't even know where my dog is.
I think sometimes
God,
he hears
the golden opportunity. As soon as I heard the barking, I should have been like, "Ow, ow!"
Yeah. Nick,
sometimes he hears the deer that like on my front lawn and just loses his mind.
Yeah, I could barely hear you, Nick. You said something about how you were diagnosed with Paprium or something.
Yeah.
I was saying by the next time we do this, Paprium will either be out or not out, so we'll have something to talk about either way. Who here still has their pre-orders in for that?
I do.
I wasn't dumb enough to buy it because I kind of had a feeling that it was never going to come out. So there you go.
I have something to say about that. Is there were 3 large-scale Genesis titles right on and during that year that came out either on Kickstarter or whatever asked for funding or pre-orders. Tanglewood, Xenocrisis, and Paprium, right?
Well, Paprium's been out going on for like 6 years. This is a much longer saga.
Yeah, but I mean, those pre-orders all kind of came out roughly like within a couple of months of each other, right? And I did the PCBs for 2 of them, and the PCBs are shipped for 2 of them. So,
so you're saying now we won't see a Paprium release until you're doing the PCB for it?
No, what I'm saying is people should only buy pre-orders for Genesis games that I made the PCB for because we actually ship.
But they didn't. But when the pre-order was out, you didn't know that you were making it. You got hired after the fact.
That's right. Yeah, but I mean, I have a good track record. I mean, Tanglewood and Xenocrisis boards aren't in people's hands yet, but they're not in the factory's hands anymore. So
I wonder how that works with people who want to get refunds for that. Did they?
I got a refund for it.
Did you?
Yeah.
Okay. It's not like PayPal, like, if you get it like the, if you do something through PayPal and 6 months goes by and you want a refund, you're not getting it legally, right? You don't have.
They don't have to, yeah.
So all kidding and snarky comments aside, they refunded everybody that asked for a refund, right?
I don't know.
Yeah, but I think so, but to varying degrees of time. Like, I got mine fairly timely, but I did it, I think, at the start of a giant wave of people being like, fuck this project. It was right when, like, tons of stuff was blowing up on, like, Atari Age or Nintendo Age or whatever.
Where the guy had his own website dedicated to just showing how it's a fraud.
Yeah, Pepper Fiasco, and they posted that stupid thing over Christmas last year and of whatever Fonzie in a Speedo and gave no update, and everyone was just getting super annoyed, and I think some people may have taken a lot longer to get their refunds.
I'm hanging on to my pre-order because there were some leaked board pics a few months ago, and one of them shows a TI DSP and some what appears to be like a PS RAM chip. So I'm really intrigued. Yeah, I'm really intrigued onto how they implemented the hardware. So I want to.
Someone in the chat says they still have to refund a lot of people. I mean, I want to see it too. If it comes out and is available to purchase, I will purchase it. But yeah, I just didn't feel like supporting a company that behaved in this way. It wasn't really about the money. It was about their behavior and not giving people updates or taking anybody seriously.
You could borrow mine. I'm never gonna.
Isn't that interesting? What is it with if I took somebody's money for something, right, and I was developing something and I went silent and I never updated anybody on anything, dude, I couldn't fucking sleep at night. I would be throwing up.
Yeah.
Just with nerves, I would be nothing but a bundle of nerves. I don't know how people can operate like that and just be cool and just be calm. Like I'm really weird about shit like that.
No,
just
that's the proper way to be, I think. But,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, so I guess we'll see for next time.
Yeah, we'll see for next time. Yay. On the next podcast, Bob will be showing his nudes, he'll be showing his hot dog, and he will be playing a game.
I'm just very glad that I made the decision to cut off the Indiegogo last year when I did, because any bad thing you could say about me is probably 100% true, but the bottom line is I didn't take anybody's money. Period.
That's why your campaign was a failure. Now on to the next question. Oh, Bob, you know what? I was thinking about this, and I know we're probably wanting to wrap up, but I think no. I think that it might not be a bad idea to revisit some elements of your of that sort of Kickstarter Indiegogo thing.
It's already being done behind the scenes. The short version is the people that got it required no explanation. I didn't need to make those videos. I didn't need to do the page. The people who got the idea got it immediately and are behind it, and the people that didn't probably never will. But I'm lucky enough that the people that did get it are people that have the power to help. It's probably going to take another year or so, but all of that shit's going to happen in a way better than I could have ever dreamed. Obviously the idea was always bigger than me. It was always, let's make this about everybody else. But yeah, in fact, the fact that it didn't go through in the long run is probably way better because of what it's going to turn into. That has nothing to do with me in a good way, a very good way. So
Nick,
there you go.
Nick.
Sometimes it's good to fail.
Nothing's bigger than you, Bob.
I don't know, man. I'm losing some weight. I still got my muscles.
Well, let me ask you this, Bob.
Muscles are real shitty.
How long do you think? Hey, Nick.
Oh.
How long do you think it's going to be, Bob? How long do you think it's going to be until you become the most important person in retro gaming? Maybe even more important than Frank Cifaldi.
I don't think I could ever be more important than Kevtris. I think Kevtris could retire right now, today, and I could work the rest of my life to try preserving things and helping, and I still don't think I could contribute as much as he did. But I'm sure as fuck gonna try. So there you go.
Yeah, it's a matter of trying. I'm going to try too. I want to help everybody.
Mm-hmm.
I learned my lesson to never try.
Yeah. Never try at all.
I'll try to try. All right,
Renee,
well,
what the hell have you been doing, Renee?
who cares?
He's
He's
the
just
only one doing productive
he
things.
he ripped a giant bong right before this episode started, and he has just been spacing the whole time, just
He
waiting
has
for
been
us
organizing
to
all
wrap
of his lists
this
on
up.
Pornhub. That's pretty much it.
Now he's been designing the MiSTer chip for Watermelon games. I
Yeah,
guess.
yeah. The ND,
Oh,
the secret NDA
yes,
is that
the
I'm
NDA.
designing the third board as well.
Yeah.
It's an MP3 player that activates every time they start a song. There you go.
All right.
I posted it twice already. I'm gonna post it one more time just in case somebody's not paying attention. That is the two pictures in the chat right now. One of them has a 720p capture that's perfect. The other one has a 240p capture that's not. Same console, same setup. So that's the data path issue right there. So if you want to take 240p captures, in fact, take both if you have a scaler, just so that you could also verify good and bad.
Mm-hmm.
And if your 240p captures are uniform, they don't have that, that weird, one side's darker than the other. Please contact me and let me know. I'll get a page up on the website immediately, and I'll even be glad to host the driver until DataPath sues me for intellectual property. But whatever, I'm still telling you to buy their shit. So.
Right
Okay,
on.
mate.
All right. Well, we will see you next time. Remember to do all the stuff that we're supposed to tell you to do as YouTubers, like smash that subscribe button or whatever.
And comment below.
Yeah, comment below.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
But yeah, no,
Put the
seriously, if you have
questions.
questions for next time, leave them below. We'll try to get to them.
We'll try our best.
And join us for Bob's epic video game failure. Join me in the ranks of not finishing a game.
Yeah, there's no way I'm going to beat anything that I play. So I might as well have a good experience then, because you're not going to see me beat anything. But
That's for sure.
All right.
You know what? Post down below what you would like to hear. Not in the chat, in the comments, because the chat gets deleted still. I was thinking of trying to do another Metroid 2 remake, but in widescreen 240p on a BVM. Of course, I'd stream digitally. I was thinking of Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 using the HAS. I kind of want that one, but I think I'm going to get my ass kicked. And I don't know. So I want to do something unique, so that way, at least when I fail, it's still worth watching. Any suggestions? Post down below.
Sounds good. We will see you next time.
See you
Until
guys.
next time, guys. See you later.
Laters.